never actually had proper information on who manages who. So collecting this information is actually, as you can imagine, a really, really big task. There have been discussions ongoing. We have collected a lot of information already. I think we're going out for a final time before go live. We're going out in November in order to get the final data back in December. So it's important that everybody understands how the roles operate within the system. And it's important because it might be that actually once you've got the understanding of how the roles operate within the system, that you actually think about changing some of the line management structures in your individual areas of activity. A very classic case is that of a school, head of school. Traditionally, the head of school manages every single academic in their area. Now, if that was the case and it was a big school and the head of school had, say, 80 direct reports, they would be inundated with notifications for all of the tasks that a line manager has to do within the system. And so it's, we have to think very, very carefully about the structures that we actually hardwire into the system. And so that's why roles is such an important issue. It's quite complex and it's quite difficult to get your head around initially, but with the talk that we're going to have now from Esther, I think this will really help you to understand the significance of it. So one thing to say is that this session is being recorded. So if you ask a question at the end, and there will be a Q&A session at the end, you will have your voice recorded, and I hope that's okay with all of you. So I'm going to hand you over to Esther. Esther is a functional lead in the HRP workstream, and she knows everything there is to know about roles.
Thank you. And thank you all for coming. It's nice to see so many people are interested in roles. Perhaps not as interested as I am, but it's nice to see so many of you taking the time out of your day, so thank you. So I thought I'd start with a bit of a roles update and how we got to where we are. We started the process by coming out and talking to a lot of people across the university about what sort of thing they needed from roles, how many people were likely to hold roles, what those roles needed to do. We then took that information back and analysed it and thought about it in line with the process work that we were doing. So there was also a lot of consultation around what our core processes were for HR and finance. And obviously the focus on that was making the most efficient processes, so not to replicate exactly what we do now, but to bring in efficient processes. And we needed to make sure that the information we'd collected around roles fit together with that work. So we analysed that. We then started to look at the system and say, right, what are the capabilities in the system? What can the system do? And does that fit with the sort of thing that we've collected as well? We moved on then to a phase that HR are just coming out of and finance are just behind on that. They're testing some of their roles at the moment, and the HR and payroll workstream have just come out of that to make sure that these roles that we defined actually work in the system. And only once we'd finished that did we want to come back and do these sorts of presentations so that we can be quite confident in what we're talking about in terms of the roles that we will deliver. So, as I say, HR are just coming out of that, finance are just ever slightly behind us, and if there are finance questions, we've got Mike Dean here from the finance workstream who'll be able to help me. So the process we're doing now is sort of recording these roles, getting them defined so that we can get these comms out to you, and obviously this is a big part of that. And then, as Charlotte said, in November, once you've had time to digest this information and understand what these roles are, we'll be going out and asking you, in your areas, who needs to hold these roles. And we'll be giving you a good few weeks. So we go out at the end of November, I think, and ask for this information. Then middle of December, we'll be asking for the information back, so that when we go live, these people have already got these roles ready to go. So I'm going to give you a bit of information about how roles work. I won't go into too much detail because it can be pretty painful. But there are three main aspects I suppose you need to know about, which is what can you do in the system? So as a line manager, what actions have you got available to you? Who you can see. So for example, in HR, they will see a real broad group of people. As a line manager, you will see information just about the people that report to you. And then there's an additional layer that is important, which is around who you can report on. So just because your line management hierarchy will control who you can see functionally in the sort of front end of the system, it is possible to add another role on that allows you to report out the back end and pull data over a broader range of people. But obviously you have to be quite careful who those roles go to, because you're going to have access to information that isn't necessarily in your line management structure, and I'll go into that a little bit more. Something to note, that Taleo, which is the recruitment module of the system, have roles built slightly differently to the rest of the system. So, for example, if we gave somebody the line manager role in HCM, and we'll move on to what that looks like and what sort of actions you can do, you don't automatically get the hiring manager role in Recruit. So if we come out and ask you, who are your hiring managers and who are your line managers, and you wonder, well, surely they're the same thing, there is a slight difference between the two. Roles are layered against a person, so you can have lots of different hats on. You might be, if you work in HR and you're a senior manager, you'd have your employee hat on to go and do your expenses, to book holiday, etc. You might also be a line manager, so you'd have a role for your line manager tasks. You'd then have a senior manager HR role, which would give you read-only access to HR data in the system. You might then have some financial roles as well, so budget roles that will help you manage the budget, etc. You don't have to log in as different people, so you log in once to the system and it collates all of those roles and allows you to do the different bits and pieces that you need to do. Certain roles are auto-assigned, so what that means is, because if we set you up as an employee, you automatically get the employee role. There's no manual work to say, if you've got a new starter, they become an employee. You don't then have to request that they get the additional role so that they can actually do their self-service stuff. So employee, line manager, you don't need to go and raise any tickets to ask for those sorts of roles to be applied. That will automatically happen. So when we set up a line manager, if we make my line manager Charlotte and she didn't have the role before, she's automatically going to get that because we've made that connection between the two. Other roles need to be manually maintained, and that's quite sensible because they tend to be roles that have access to more sensitive data or to more complicated tasks. So we don't want somebody to automatically get one of the HR roles. We need to make sure that they've gone through the right training before we assign those sorts of roles. So they will still be tasked to request certain roles to be assigned to certain people. This is a summary, an overview of the different roles in the system. I haven't got into the detail of different HR and finance ones because we will do that separately with those teams. But roles that we will come out and talk to you about and ask which employees need which roles. You've got what are called abstract roles, which are at the top. So that is things like employee, casual. This is about roles based on the sort of relationship you have with the university. So are you a casual, are you an employee, are you an honorary? And different roles will give you different access. Clearly an honorary doesn't need the same level of access as an employee does. Line manager will give you managed self-service, so you're going to get approvals and stuff, you're going to see who your direct reports are, etc. You've then got head of school and head of college, which are reasonably similar in terms of what they can do in the system. We add a layer of a reporting role on this one because the structures, the line management structures in schools, often the support staff won't report through to head of school, but they will need visibility, and that's where that reporting role comes in to give additional visibility of data across the system. Ops manager, that's also a reporting role, very similar to what head of school and head of college will give. I'm going to go into some specific details around these roles in a minute, so I might answer any questions there. If not, we can go through them at the end. A recruitment coordinator role, that's a Taleo role that we will give to certain people in departments and schools, colleges, that have some responsibility to help coordinate recruitment. And it will give you a view across the school or across the department. If you're logged in as a hiring manager, you're only going to see vacancies, candidates that are relevant to vacancies that you're recruiting for. Recruitment coordinator gives you across the board, across the department or school. A local health and safety role. So this is what will go out to what I think are called health and safety, are they coordinators, reps. So this is the people who sit, not the people who sit in health and safety, the department, but health and safety in schools and departments that need to get onto the system to do things like raise risk assessments, etc. There's a UEB role, which again is just a reporting role. This isn't about getting in the front end of the system and manage a self-service, anything like that. This is about giving visibility across different reports. And then there are functional roles, so HR and finance roles, and there are quite a few of those. But I don't think this is the right place to go into those. It probably bore a lot of you. So this is about, as an HR recruiter, you can do these things. As a accounts payable manager, you need to be able to do these activities. So I'll go into a bit more detail about each one of those now. So the employee role, I'll do some I've got some screenshots as well to give you a little bit of a flavour of what the system looks like. But the employee role gives access to manage your personal details. So at the moment, you know, that all has to go through HR at the moment. You have to raise a ticket, HR have to do stuff on your behalf. But this is going to give employees the access to do it themselves and give them the responsibility to maintain this themselves as well. Something that I find exciting, just because I'm sad, is that employees are now going to be able to see their own employment information, which forever here has been hidden, you know, because you can't get access to the current HR system. So for the first time, all of the data around, you know, what your job title is and if you're on a fixed term contract, what your projected end date, that becomes visible to employees for the first time. And I think that there will be, well, maybe not, maybe it really is just no, but I think one of the first things you do when we go live is people are going to want to have a look at what this data is, because for so long it's not been available to them. View pay slips, again, wow, we're going online for pay slips. So, and they'll be able to see other payroll documentation as well, so P60s, compensation statements, things like that. That's all available through the system. You can request absences, so gone are the days of losing holiday forms. You can, there's different types of absences, so you could book annual leave, you could put sicknesses through, etc. You complete time cards, so for people who are eligible for overtime, they can claim their overtime through the system. Casuals can do that as well. They can change benefit elections, so this is where we have things like the annual leave purchase scheme that can go through the system as well. You can elect that, and then you'll see your holiday balance increase based on that. You can search the directory, so you can look across the university, search for other people. You can do that by their name or their department. If you think, I know I met somebody once, but I can't quite remember their name, you can start to drill down into sort of the sorts of jobs people do. And again, it's, you know, it's functionality that we don't have at the moment. It's kind of basic, but it's going to be really exciting to see for the first time. And you can see how people all fit together in the directory as well, so you can see who people report to, who people's staff members are. You're not going to have to, if you're anything like me and you have to build an org chart in Visio and you spend far too long getting those arrows to line up, that's gone. You know, you can do this straight from the system, you can download it and stick it into a presentation if you need to. You can record and request expenses. As an employee, you can raise financial requisitions. If there are questions on that, I'll hand over to Mike. You also automatically get the hiring manager access into Leo. So we made a decision that as an employee, you might not be a line manager yet, but as soon as you do your first piece of recruitment, you are going to be a line manager. So by getting the employee role, you automatically inherit the hiring manager role into Leo. And that will save some of the maintenance of the first time that you need to recruit. You don't have to go and request that role. You can also resign directly in the system as well, and that will go to line managers to approve. I've popped a couple of screenshots in. So this is what the employee homepage looks like. This will look different depending on what other roles you've got. So this person only has employees, so this is what's currently available. If you also had HR access, for example, you would see some of the bits and pieces on here. This is a screenshot of your overview of your absence screen. So you will see the history of any absences that you've put in. You can see your holiday balance at the bottom. And the next screen is, this is what the screen looks like when you need to book a day's leave. So it's pretty straightforward stuff. And it lets you know if you've done something wrong. So if you've tried to say, if you've put a start date in and haven't put an end date in, it's not going to let you submit that. It's going to block you and tell you need to put an end date and things like that. It's pretty it's pretty intuitive. So other similar roles that are based on relationship are casual. There is some stuff that an employee can do that we don't need a casual to do. So we have a separate role for that to save confusion. So a casual can still maintain their personal details. They can still submit time cards, expenses, requisitions. They still need to see their pay slips. And there are a certain number of absences that casuals are entitled to. So they also have access to those absence screens that I've just shown you. Agency workers, consultants, external secondees, they don't need to do much in the system. But it makes sense for them to maintain their personal details here. That includes things like emergency contacts. So if something did happen on campus, we've got their emergency contacts available. Sponsored visitors, which some people know them as tier 5s. Again, we need to maintain their personal details and we need to track attendance. And so they also have time cards in which they can do that. Postgraduate students, quite limited what they can do in the system. You know, this isn't their core system. Their details should be maintained in Banner, but because of the sort of work that they might be, or the sort of research, etc., they might be doing, they might need access to be able to raise requisitions and claim expenses. Contracted workers, it's quite a specific relationship that not many people, we don't have loads of them across the university, but there are a handful, and they get paid through our payroll, so they need access to pay slips, and they also need to maintain their personal details. Then we've got sort of everybody else, which covers honorary, emeritus, tenants and other visitors. And again, really this is just about us having up-to-date personal details for them, including things like emergency contacts. The manager role. So the manager can view their team structure, they can see who their direct reports are and their indirect reports. Again, exciting, they can start to see contractual information. So this problem that I think some people have at the moment where they don't realise somebody's attached to the wrong department until some kind of report, like a pay review or something, spreadsheet goes out. This can all be fixed real time now. And it's the first time that we've been able to give direct access to this stuff so that it can be maintained really quickly. That should be projected end date, so they can also, this will help with fixed term contracts, for example. They're going to have people's projected end dates visible to them. Managers can approve or record absences, so whilst an employee can submit an absence, a manager would then approve it. A manager can also do this on their behalf. Where appropriate, we will always encourage an employee to kick off this process. It's their responsibility to book leave, for example. But if you need to, by exception, it's absolutely fine for a manager to go in and do this on somebody else's behalf. They can approve or record time cards. So again, they could record a time card on somebody's behalf if they need to, but really it should be about an approval process. They can change the location of one of their employees. They can add certain elements of compensation, so things like a first aid allowance, an acting up allowance. Managers can kick that process off in here. Lots of compensation is still going to go for an HR approval, but it means that you're not dealing with raising tickets, sending emails, etc. They can approve expenses, they can request hours changes. Again, that goes through to HR. HR are going to need to write to somebody. But this all kicks off in Nucor. They can approve resignations. They can actually also put a resignation on for somebody if necessary. They can record risk assessments and incident reports if they need to. And also they can see information about their staff, like if somebody has submitted a gifts and hospitality form, if somebody has had company property given out to them. A manager can maintain this here so that when they're leaving, they've got a list of what that property is that they need to get back. Conflict of interest, outside activities, similar as above. They can only view those, they don't amend, they don't edit them. And they can report on a lot of stuff, so things like absences, fixed term contracts, secondments, etc. And I think we will see over time, after go live, we will start to see more and more reports being added to that line manager suite of reports as we go out and find out what it is people need to see. The data's in there, we can get at it. I think there'll be a process of finding out what people really need. We did that when we did the roles piece, but I think when you start to see the system, you'll think of even more things that you'd like to see. I've popped a couple of screenshots in again to give you a flavour of what it looks like. Very similar to the employee homepage. There's some additional tasks that you can do on here. At the bottom you can see some reminders, so if things have been submitted to you. At the top you've got a little bell that tells you how many things you need to work on, and at the bottom it's the same notifications, but it's more in your face. You need to do something about these items. This is what the My Team bit looks like. So when I said you can see your reports, your direct reports and indirect reports, this is the screen that you'll see. If an employee here had some reports, you would see a little number at the bottom, and that would show you there your indirect reports, and you can get access to them. What I've done on this one is Gaga employee. This is how would you go in, this is how you go in and add an absence. So you're clicking on the employee, clicking on absence, manage absence records, and then you see exactly the same screen as the employee did in terms of adding or amending absences. Then move on to the more function-specific roles. So as I said, head of school role, primarily a reporting role, but in addition they will approve conflicts of interest through the system, and where appropriate, or if they need to, they can ask for other people to get involved in that approval. So you can reroute an approval if you need to. Head of college, very similar. They approve outside activities, but again, if somebody else needs to be involved in that, they can add another user into that chain of approval. And again, there's stuff that they can report on, like absence rates, etc. Ops manager, they don't have any functional role within the system. They're obviously going to have a line manager role anyway to manage their lot, to manage their teams. But on top of that, we've given them this reporting role so that they can manage absence rates across the whole area, regardless of whether somebody reports to them or not. There's some bits around our sponsored employees, Tier 2 and Tier 5. And again, I think over time, after go live, we'll start to see the reports that people have access to increase. Recruitment coordinator I talked about earlier, this is a Taleo role, and this allows somebody, it might be somebody like an ops manager or a PA administrator, depending on what the structure is in your area. This allows somebody to manage recruitment across the whole department that they have responsibility for. So this will help out. They could raise a requisition for a vacancy on behalf of an academic or a manager, and then they can manage that recruitment piece for them around shortlisting, etc. A casual hiring manager, you don't auto-inherit this like you do line manager, because there are specific people across the university who have been given authority to hire casual staff. So this will be one of those ones where we need to come out and say, who is it in your area has responsibility for this? UEB reporting, it's purely a reporting role. And then there are the functional HR and finance roles, which give really detailed access depending on the sort of work that you need to do. Okay, something that's come up quite a lot when we've been going out and talking to staff across the university is if you can delegate roles, and the only role you can delegate within the system is the line manager role. And it's really important that when you're thinking about this, you bear in mind that you are delegating the entire role. So if my line manager delegates to me, I can then see everything that they can see as a line manager. I can't just delegate, for example, the absence bit of the role. I'm going to delegate absence, the time and labour bit, which is timesheets. I'm going to start to see data about people around salaries and stuff. So it shouldn't be a quick decision who you delegate to. That really needs some thought. And the employee can do that themselves. So, for example, if I go on holiday and I need somebody to manage my team whilst I'm off, I can do that myself. I can delegate to somebody else and I can set that up for a period of time so it automatically expires at the end of my holiday, for example. And that's a good example of when you should delegate and it's appropriate to delegate, but there will be circumstances when it's not appropriate to delegate. But it's down to employees and managers to make sure they are responsible around who they delegate to. If Alison, my boss, delegates to me, I can manage the rest of the team. I can't then get into my record and start changing my salary or giving me, less hours or whatever it is. So there is restriction around that. To be GDPR compliant, so for data protection reasons, there are guidelines that we should adhere to. So, for example, it's really important under GDPR that we can justify why we've delegated. So, I get too many notifications, it's a pain, wouldn't be justifiable. Somebody going on leave and somebody needing to cover that work is justifiable, and you should record that you have. The system will record that you've done it, but it would make sense to record why you've done it so that if there was ever a claim, you can see why that person was delegated to. It's also really important that we're transparent. So again, if Alison delegates to me, Alison should let her team know that that's what's happened, because you've just given somebody access to data that the team necessarily wouldn't necessarily know about. You should only really delegate to people who are the same or a higher grade. In the circumstance where Alison's delegating to me, you are delegating to one level below, but it's justifiable. What you shouldn't be doing is delegating to somebody at the bottom of your team who can then see salaries, etc., for people more senior to them. Equally, we should try and avoid delegating to support members of staff. This is something that legal advised us on, and it's because they don't have a confidential and compliance obligation in their T's and C's, whereas academic and other related do. So the key message is it's doable, but you do need to think about it. You shouldn't just dish out delegation without really thinking through, is it justifiable? Have I let people know? Have I done it for the appropriate amount of time? And then it's over to you for questions.
Okay, thanks, Esther. So,
Thank you.
I don't think we need microphones because this is very well wired up. So, who's got some questions? Let's chat.
Hi there. Thanks for that. The question I've got, we talked about delegation there and line management. So, a scenario in which I'm signed off on long-term sick, does my line manager automatically have delegation over my staff?
So the line.
Or do I have to go in and assign them as line manager that could be in a direct report?
What won't happen is approvals won't start routing to them automatically, but they have got access to your team. So if they need to go in sort of the back route, they can go and approve absences, for example, but they're not going to get the notifications. You can set it up and HR would be able to have access to help you do that. If you're off sick, you can't do it yourself, but we could do that on your behalf. We could delegate to somebody. But it's whether you need it or not, because your line manager automatically gets access to your indirect reports anyway.
And sorry, just a quick one. On the directory, there was the kind of blanked out photos. Is the expectation that
People can put photos in.
Finally see what it looks like?
Yeah.
At the back. Oh, could you speak up, please?
Sorry.
Sorry, you've got postgraduate students on there, and they could be able to submit expenses. There's a couple of things on that. We haven't been asked for information around line managers for postgraduate students, so how does that work? And also, personal details didn't seem to be on there. How did that get into the system?
Yeah, so personal details is intentionally left out, and that's because we want them to maintain their personal information in their core system, which isn't the HR system, that's the student system. So if they're updating their address, they should do that in Banner, I think is the right place. Around approvals, we would add line managers in. Is it line managers that approve expenses? It is. So we will need to collect that data as well. But I guess it goes to their supervisor, does it? their line manager would be the equivalent of their supervisor.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Hi, I'm just really concerned about that last point you made. So band 500s won't be able to have any line manager.
No, they can have line manager. They can have line manager, but we shouldn't really delegate to them, is the advice from legal. So if you are if you're a grade 8, you should avoid delegating to a band 400. For example, you should look for somebody at a more similar level. But they will get, if they are a manager, they will obviously automatically get that line manager role.
But the situation we have in sport is that we've got say we've got 4 people that are band 500s that have management responsibilities. If one or other of those are not, they would want to delegate.
Shouldn't they delegate across the team?
But I thought if they can't go to another line.
You shouldn't really be going down the hierarchy, but if they can delegate across at the same level, that's okay.
So support staff can be line managers.
I think, yes, definitely support, yes, they can. What we're trying to avoid is, for example, somebody like a head of school or...
No, I understand that, but you don't want those positions at that
Yeah.
level.
But yes, a support member of staff, there is nothing to stop a support member of staff being an employee within the system.
So if I'm 500, I can delegate to another 500.
Yes.
Right.
I'm on a mixed contract. I have 75% of full-time in one position with one line manager and 25% in another position with another line manager. In the 75% position, I have one person reporting into me. Would my other line manager from my other employment be able to see her details?
No, because you've got the... it would be based on the assignment hierarchy or the position hierarchy there, yeah.
It's a simple question to the colleague in school. So, in catering, what happens for the hierarchy classes from band into grades, where there is only one person in each role? So there are multiple 500.
I think, personal opinion, and somebody stop me if I say something wrong, we're going to have to be pragmatic in teams where it is, there is nobody else to delegate to. You're going to have to do that, but the advice is try and avoid it where you can and where it's inappropriate. But as you say, if you have nobody else who is exactly the same, you're going to have to go down one level.
It has to be justifiable.
Yeah, that's the main thing.
But it's possible.
It's technically possible, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
I've got a quick question about the time recording.
Yeah.
So in the research group that I'm the manager of, we have a lot of like EU reports or ERDF grants and stuff. So will those timesheets be relevant to those, or
Yes.
is it just?
I should have said actually that includes project reporting as well, time reporting.
Yes, originally there was some of the roles planned around absence.
Yeah, so that was all part of that consultation when we went out to say what is it the university wants, and then there was the analysis of what does the university want, what do the processes look like, and what can the system deliver. So we did talk about that because we know it's commonplace at the moment that some people do manage, purely manage absence, and there were a couple of things. One, it doesn't really fit with the efficient process, but secondly, and possibly more importantly, it's not technically possible anyway within the system. So yes, we talked about it when we went out to find out what people wanted, and now that we've done the thorough testing and we really know what can be delivered, we're going out with what is actually possible within the system.
Does the same apply to finance approvals as well? So all the requisition approvals go to the line manager rather than off to a...
Requisitions is a bit different, isn't it?
So, no, is the answer to your question. So when requisitioning as the start of the PCP process, then they will, those requisitions will go to an approval pool, a sort of finance buying approval pool, if you like, which may or may not be the same people, but we'll be collecting that information as part of the exercise in November and establishing approval pools for requisitioning as separate from the line management structure. Although inevitably there will be crossover of the same individuals, I'm sure.
Sorry, just one that point, will those approval pools include the budget holder?
Yes, absolutely. They will be the budget, those colleagues with budgetary responsibilities in schools and departments and professional services, absolutely.
In terms of when you said we could delegate activities, so we'd be able to delegate expense approvals, but it would be delegating everything. I understood that.
Yeah, so you can't,
It's
for example,
all
just
on the
delegate absence or expense. You were delegating the entire role, the line manager role.
But would it be, you could, even though the whole bit has been delegated, you could just have someone doing the expenses? So can it actually share?
You could, but you'd need to think about whether it's justifiable, because what you're doing is giving access to things like salary data at that point, and is it appropriate that if they are just meant to be approving expenses, is it appropriate that they can now see somebody's sickness record or their salary, for example?
And the expenses delegation, I'm assuming there's no way that would be delegated in terms of budgets or anything like that. It's literally
It's part of that line manager role.
I think on the approval, sort of budgetary approval calls, I think we're making sure that the other people in there, not so we don't get single points of failure in terms of colleagues not being around and therefore things hanging waiting for approval for too long.
Hello.
Just to get a time card isn't to be used, for example, like a flex card sheet called flexing.
No, this is about, so it's got a few purposes. One is overtime, one is casual, one is project time, and then there's the stuff around attendance monitoring.
Sorry, I may well have missed it. I'm just wondering how students that are currently employed through work group to do work for the university handle
How they fit in it, yeah. So in the main, they have a casual relationship with the university in terms of the sort of work that they're doing, so they get exactly the same access as a casual would. Okay.
Back again.
Will the line manager be able to set funding source of individuals who are employees?
Not through the front end of the system, no. Do you mean when you say funding source, are you actually talking about like the funding body, or do you mean like the account code?
The account code, so considering they put funding for research projects, for instance, be able to work out whether on that project moves to another one, so we'll be able to say what that looks like.
There's nothing in the front end. There could, I don't know off the top of my head, there could be something in reporting that does that, and if not, that might be something that post go live might be the sort of report that you want to request.
Sorry, I missed it, but so the requisitions will go to an approval pool. The staff expenses also go to an approval pool.
No.
No, so the intention is they'll be approved by line managers.
So what about staff expenses, perhaps on the research projects that need to be approved by PI, and the PI is in a certain line manager? So an administrative staff being paid off a research grant, who isn't line managed by the PI?
Yes, we know that the line management answer isn't going to suit everybody, but I think we are going to go with it because it's the out-of-the-box solution, and we will see how it goes, and we will rely on some reporting to ensure that things aren't going awry there. But we're aware of some of the limitations of that, but that is the way that the system configures. So we're going to start with it, but we're aware of some of the concerns.
You mentioned the line manager option that there's going to be a section where they log items that need to be returned. Is that feeding an RT?
No, it's entirely separate. And it could be sort of like uniform, for example, so it's not all just IT kit.
I've got two questions. So you said postgraduate students, is that full-time research or just research?
It's all of them, yeah.
And